Episode 39.
That's a quality introduction.
um, yeah. Okay, episode 39. Me, Chucky, and Jiggy.
It is indeed jiggy, bitches.
I've got nothing.
Okay.
Just like my intro, I've got nothing. Anyways, what have we got for this week?
Indeed. So we have a nice mixture of classics and, well, mostly non-classics. So we have Videodrome from 1983, Canadian classic. Following that, we have the 1995 Ice Cream Man. Then we have our action movie of the night, Malibu Express from 1985.
That certainly has some action in it.
Yes, as Chucky will elaborate quite a bit on, I can imagine. Then we have Crowspace from 1986, not to be confused with the TV movie from the 70s. And we finish off tonight with Valentine from 2001.
Yeah. We get things started off with Videodrome from 1983. This is a movie that centers around Max, who was played by James Woods, who is the president of a trashy TV channel and is desperate for new programming to attract viewers. So he comes across a show called Videodrome, a show which is dedicated to gratuitous torture and punishment. And as he delves further into the show, he finds out that the show isn't quite what he thinks it is, and his reality starts changing around him, and it's all good stuff. I don't really want to get too much into the plot, because I guess that's a part of what people would really be clinging on to when they watch this movie, I guess.
Yeah, the movie is really an experience, and it's something you should experience for yourselves, not listen to two guys talk about it. But
Yeah. I kind of tried to watch this movie a long time ago, and I don't know if I ever finished it, and I don't think I ever did. So I did buy it again recently, with the purpose of watching it again, obviously. So I watched this again, and much like a lot of other Cronenberg movies, it's like he definitely has some different ideas when it comes to movies. Like, it's not just the same old type of movie that a lot of other people are making. He's usually got something intriguing. So yeah, Cronenberg usually intrigues me, but quite often his movies don't necessarily do it for me. There's like maybe a couple of scenes in his movies that stand out, and then the rest of it, I don't know, I'm just sitting there waiting for something to happen. I mean, this movie has a really, really great gore scene towards the end, and a few decent scenes towards the end. But for a good portion of the movie, I was just sitting there just kind of waiting for certain things to happen. I mean, I guess that means the story itself still didn't quite do it to me. It's one of those things where you have to think a lot about it, and not all of it is making 100% clear sense as you're watching it, so it's sort of confusing at times as well. I don't know, maybe there's some people out there who get it, and maybe I just didn't get it. So, look, I had an okay time with it, but at the same time, yeah, it just didn't do it for me. What did you think about this one?
yeah, so I forget how many episodes ago we covered it, but we talked about Cronenberg's movie The Brood from 79, and in much the same way I thought about that one, this one has never quite done that much for me. Now, I've seen Videodrome maybe 3 or 4 times now, and much like my experiences with most other Cronenberg movies, it just I just don't get it. The concept is really cool. The idea, as far as I understand the idea, is pretty cool. But this execution, more than anything, just confuses the hell out of me. And like I said, I've seen this like 3 or 4 times, so it's not getting any clearer, guys. Not to say that there's not reasons for everything that happens in the movie, but it's not something as a casual viewer I would really take all that much enjoyment in. I mean, I really like the mystery aspects, the losing grip on reality type stuff, but the whole body horror thing, was never my cup of tea, and unfortunately, that's like 90% of what Cronenberg does. So it's unfortunate. Like Chucky said, there are some really great special effects here, especially toward the end. So it's not like there's not a lot of good things in the movie. It's just once it comes to the end in this movie, I'm like, was it really worth watching? I mean, it's a decent movie. If you're into like the more weird sci-fi, psychological-esque side of horror, it's certainly worth watching if you haven't seen it already. And I have no problem calling it a classic, but it's not really a movie I would find myself going back to other often.
I mean, you brought up The Brood, and I had a similar thought. That's one of the movies I kept thinking of as I kept watching this. It's another Cronenberg movie that's, it's okay. It, once again, just didn't hit the spot for me. And it got me thinking of what other movies has Cronenberg made that I actually enjoyed. So I started looking through the list because I could only think of a few off the top of my head. And, The Fly is a bit better than this one, even though still The Fly is not, an all-time favorite movie of mine or anything. And then I'd say probably A History of Violence is probably the one that stands out the most for me personally, and I did see that one in the theaters, so... But yeah, this is a guy with a pretty big following, and he's definitely made a lot of movies that people enjoy. And if you go on IMDb, they generally have really good ratings. I mean, even Videodrome's got I think like a 7.2 or something like that. So there's definitely people out there who enjoy it. And I mean, I didn't have a bad time with it. It just didn't hit the spot for me. So yeah, it's a little weird to see a director who makes movies in a genre that we like, and so few of them really stand out for me.
I do want to point out, I'm not sure if you've seen this movie or not, but from 1975, he had a movie called They Come From Within, also known as Shivers, which is pretty gore, zombie-esque type movie. So that's certainly worth watching, and that's probably out of the movies I've seen from Cronenberg. It's a bit more mainstream, but it's also probably one of the more enjoyable ones, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't recall if I've watched it. I know the poster and all that, so I definitely know which movie you're talking about, but I don't know if I've bothered to watch that one.
Ironically, two of his biggest movies I've not actually seen yet, being Scanners from 81 and, what's it called, Rabid, I think, from 77.
Yeah, I've seen Rabid, I've seen Scanners, and I probably need to watch those again to really know how I feel about them, but I'm pretty sure both of those, I feel pretty much the same way about those as I do with, Videodrome and The Brood.
So pretty much, guys, get ready for a Cronenberg show next week.
Yeah, so, like, with Scanners, as far as I can recall, everyone knows the head explosion scene. And I mean, that's the highlight scene in the movie. Unfortunately, it happens earlier in the movie, so at least from memory it does. And I didn't feel like there was much else outside of that really, excited me. And it's kind of similar to this, like, the end, there's a few exciting parts towards the end, but for the majority of it, it's trying to build up to it, and the suspense and build up for me just isn't there.
Yeah, I think with Videodrome, there's some really interesting concepts, like I said. It just, the way they try to tie that together, it just doesn't work for me. I like the, what's that guy's name, Oblivion, obviously not his real name. I sort of like his backstory, at least what we understood about his backstory. His philosophical rambling about TV being the eye of the mind. I can do without that type of stuff, and unfortunately, that's probably part of the issue. Psychological rambling seems to be quite a big part of Cronenberg's stuff. Not like that, it can't add quite a lot to a movie. It just like the whole "Long Live the New Flesh." I have literally no idea what it's talking about. Because it seems to me Videodrome is trying to make the new Flash. Is this new Flash different from the Videodrome Flash? I don't know, and I don't know if they do either. I just don't get it. There's some really cool visuals here. Obviously, the scene where the guy is, sticks a gun into his stomach. I mean, that's somewhat disturbing scene. The TV sort of beckoning him forward. It's sort of a really cool scene. So there's plenty of good things here visually, but story-wise, while I appreciate the atmosphere, and like I said, I like some of the concepts here. It just, especially toward the end, once we find out a few more things about some of these characters and the pirate feed from the beginning, it just doesn't do nearly as much for me as I always wish it had.
I guess the the main exciting thing for me in this movie, outside of just a couple of the special effects scenes towards the end, is realizing the character of Nikki Brand, played by Deborah Harry. I had no idea she was a singer of Blondie. So, not that I'm a Blondie fan or anything, it's just, everyone knows that, or at least that Call Me song, because it's played in Bride of Chucky, but...
because everybody's seen Bride of Chucky.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have. But, it's one of those bands that's got quite a following, and I never even knew what she looked like or anything. She's pretty attractive, in my opinion, but, I don't know, that is just one of those things where, some fairly famous person that you never even knew what they looked like, and you just realize, oh, okay, that's them. They're in this movie.
I do think that leads to one of the more interesting scenes in the movie, the sort of TV interview between James Ward's character and her character, Nikki. Talking about the, violence on TV, rather than that, that causes more violence, or rather it's just a harmless outlet, which obviously that's a topic that goes on to this very day. And that's a topic that actually makes sense. I do like how Oblivion came on the show, and he's just, again, philosophical rambling. I just love the interviewer's expression. Like, she's just saying, yes, now could you please answer my question? Like, that guy is not meant for public consumption. So it just, that's one of the more interesting, and I also enjoy about that scene, how the two are talking in the background. It's not even, I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but it just cracks me up.
So if you were on that show being asked that question about, TV violence and all that kind of stuff, what would you have to say about it?
Well, so I would probably agree with most of what James Ward's character said. Difference being he's doing it obviously for financial reasons. I generally see it more as an outlet as opposed to a precursor to violence. If you're having any type of like, hey, I really want to go more to someone, well, that's probably a problem to begin with. But if you watch it on TV and you say it, then you'll probably be okay. But I just never believe the whole violence in video games and violence in movies causes violence. Now on the small side, it may cause a few people who are more mentally imbalanced to go out and do things they might otherwise not have. But for a majority of cases, pretty much I find it harmless entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, I'd pretty much just sum it up by that one line in Scream towards the end where they're saying watching horror movies or violent movies, doesn't make you a killer, it just makes a killer more creative, that type of thing.
I enjoy that.
Yeah. That's pretty much my general thought on that.
Although if you are a horror fan who has problems with violence and horror, please let us know. And also tell us what your favorite Universal horror movie is.
Yeah. So we'll just wrap this up right here. I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10. And, it's anything I give a 6 out of 10, usually I'm willing to continue giving it another shot later on. I mean, it could be however many years before I look at this one again, but like I've said, and like you've said, it's got good concepts, but it just doesn't all come together for me. It's partly confusing at times. The suspense just wasn't quite there for me, and probably that's because of the confusion with a lot of the story. Yeah, so a 6 out of 10 is where I'm at.
Yeah, and much like Chucky, I am also going to give this one a 6 out of 10. It's certainly not a bad movie, and like I said, it's a classic, and it's certainly, I have no problem calling it a classic. It's just not my type of movie, and as many times as I've seen it throughout the years, it's never been my thing. Really enjoy some parts of it, really like some aspects about the movie, but overall, I just never really enjoyed it. So I think a 6 out of 10 seems quite fair.
I guess one thing I should say about Cronenberg, which I didn't mention earlier, that man has some fantastic hair. He should be in one of those Paul Mitchell books.
I'm going to pretend I know who Paul Mitchell is and say yes, Chucky.
He's like some famous hairstylist or something. I don't know.
How do you know who Paul Mitchell is?
Well, I saw him in an Adams. Well, I don't know if he's even real. I assume he's real. But he's in this Adam Sandler movie, You Don't Mess with the Zohan, who he plays this terrorist who wants to leave his country and become a hairdresser. I don't know.
Hey, yeah, coming from someone who has literally not heard anything about that movie, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, David Cronenberg, nice hairdo. You can see it in full effect in his appearance in Jason X, I guess.
Indeed. And you know who else has a nice hairdo? Clint Howard. So, and speaking of Clint Howard, next up is the 1995 movie Ice Cream Man. Pretty basic plot. Bunch of kids happen to think the local ice cream man is a bit creepy, and they suspect he might be kidnapping children and doing unseemly things with their bodies and with their ice cream. So Ice Cream Man is a very interesting movie. It's pretty low budget, but I think it has a sort of charm to it. At least I feel it has a charm to it. And even though it's not a movie I would traditionally enjoy, there are some nostalgic factors that come into my rating of this one. I saw this one like when I was a kid quite a few times, and there's just a few scenes, even ever since I was a kid, that just, oh hey, that's actually pretty cool. So that might partially come into my taking of this movie. But what's your history with this one, Chucky?
I only watched this for the first time last night, so
that's going to be an interesting clash of perspective then.
Yeah, I've certainly heard of the movie plenty before, and I'm fairly familiar with Clint Howard. Seen him in heaps of other things, usually as smaller roles. Yeah, it's an acquired taste. I can't say that I had a good time with it. I'm not going to say I had a bad time with it either, but I don't know. It just, Clint Howard himself, I mean, he's always kind of looked weird and acted weird in his movies, and I mean, that's kind of how he is. And it's just kind of like that as a main character. So his character is interesting. I kept thinking, like, you could just put some clown makeup on him. He'd probably be scary like that, and just act the way he just usually acts.
Yeah, actually, at times he reminded me of the new Pennywise. Forget the actor's name, but
Yeah,
he had sort of
Bill
like
Skarsgård.
he had a sort of a demeanor similar to him, facial expression, and it just hit me.
Yeah, that's the same thing I was thinking of. Kind of with his voice in the movie. So him as a character in the movie is somewhat interesting. I think everything else around the movie I just don't really care for. Like, a lot of the characters, the kids I didn't really give two shits about. This old lady who, would you call her the landlady or something? I don't know, but the one who kind of sort of looks after him, or he pays rent to her with ice cream.
It was a very interesting relationship then.
Yeah, didn't care about her character, didn't care about the detectives or the cops or anything in this movie. So outside of Clint Howard's character, I just didn't care. And look, I mean, the movie, I wouldn't say it's all that funny. I don't know if it's trying to be funny in any kind of way. And the horror aspect of it it's just, I mean, the scariest thing I saw in the movie was probably how he was scooping some of that ice cream for his customers. I mean, damn, that was some sloppy ass ice cream.
Yes. Like I said, this isn't a movie that I would traditionally enjoy, and I suspect that if I saw it for the first time at this stage in my life, I probably would have cared for it. When I was a kid, a lot of the scenes, especially toward the second half, really stuck with me, such as the sort of puppet hat scene, and as goofy as it was, the the giant ice cream cone with the decapitated head in it, and I think my favorite scene in the whole movie though has to be the scene in which the two detectives are investigating the asylum which the ice cream man came from, and they find out the asylum isn't as it appears to be. No, it's not exactly a realistic scene, because of course, there would be like inspections, throughout the years, and with the state the asylum is in, it probably would be passing those inspections. So it may not be realistic, but I always did like the idea of it. And I thought that scene was probably one of the ones that was more legitimately, not necessarily scary, but it was at least more suspenseful.
Mm.
And also, I agree that I did it much care for most of the characters. Most of the kids themselves are pretty generic. I started to know that one guy's name is Tuna, but
yeah,
like you have Tuna and Smile Powell, like it just
if we had character names like that in movies today, it'd probably be considered somewhat normal. I mean, people are naming their kids all kinds of weird shit.
If somebody wants to name their kid Tuna, by all means go for it. But just think about what you're doing to your kid. So I do wish we got a little more with them. I like some of the small things, like I think the girl whose father was a priest and mother was like I don't know what's going on with the mother. Apparently some gods poked through her, so that was interesting. And there's some infidelity issues too. So all this is sort of going on in the background though, and kids being kids, it doesn't really take a vocal point, which I thought was sort of interesting. It's it's not like this movie was trying to be deep about it though. It's just background noise. And actually, another quick thing, we talked about, I forget how many shows before this was. We talked about Summer of '84, and this movie has a lot of the same type of investigative kid feel. It's taken a lot less seriously and a lot lower budget, but it just, as I was watching this, it hit me like, hey, I think I've seen this before somewhere. So it's an interesting movie. If you know what you're getting into, you would probably enjoy it more. And if you think it's just like some mid-90s slasher classic, it's not quite that. Though I would say it is nice to see a movie like this that deals more with violence toward kids as opposed to the more traditionally acceptable violence toward teenagers. So I guess in that way, go Ice Cream Man.
I've literally got no other notes.
Well,
about
what
this.
is your favorite ice cream flavor?
I can't say I go out for any kind of extravagant type of ice cream all that much. Like, I'm not going to Baskin Robbins every week or anything. But I don't know, a Rocky Road or something.
Unfortunately, that is not the right answer.
I like marshmallows, okay? So if you can put some marshmallows in my ice cream, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I did try Rocky Road once, and because of the marshmallows, it just didn't do anything for me.
I'm not such a fan of nuts in my ice cream, though.
I think if I had to choose one, you can't go wrong with cherry vanilla. Or any type of strawberry.
Did you just say vanilla?
Cherry vanilla.
What's the difference?
There's a little taste of cherry in it, and it just adds a lot.
Okay.
Although I would say though that there's a company named Ben & Jerry's who do a bit more expensive ice cream. They have a strawberry cheesecake flavor. It has little graham cracker crumbs in it. Just tastes fantastic. So that's not really comparable though to the ice cream this guy solves. Some of the actually most horrific scenes in this movie was when he was using his bare hands to like either make the ice cream.
Yeah.
It was one of the most unsanitary things I've seen in quite some time. And I think those might be some of the more disturbing things in this movie. So I personally find this movie pretty acceptable. Like I said, a big part of that might be nostalgic value, and I'm okay with that. It's nostalgic value is one of the things that you can't just get rid of. If you happen to see a movie when you were a kid, it might mean more to you when you're an adult, and I think that's always okay. So this movie, I'd probably lean toward a 6.5, and I'll probably round it out up to a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with a 5 out of 10. As I said, Clint Howard's kind of interesting, his character is, but there's not a whole lot else about the movie that I enjoyed or was really interested in. I mean, it does have a bit of a nostalgic charm feel to it. Like, it's one of these... It says it's made in 1995. At times, I could mistake this for an 80s movie, to be honest. I wouldn't say it felt like a mid-90s movie to me. But anyways, outside of that, Clint Howard, I didn't really have all that much to rave on about in this movie. And not that I raved on about Clint Howard either, but I had to rave on about something. We'll move on to the next movie, Malibu Express from 1985. A long story short, or maybe a short story short, we have this private detective who is part womanizer and part lucky son of a bitch because the women tend to just drape off him without him really doing anything. He's doing this investigation, something to do with finding out who's selling high-tech computer secrets or something like that to the Russians, and to be honest, I forget any other plot elements because all I really remember, or all that is really worth remembering, is the tits, in my opinion. The guy that made this movie, Andy Sidaris, he's got like 12 of these movies. They're sort of all connected in some way, and a lot of them have, you know, returning characters, though I don't believe really any characters from this first movie return in any of the other movies. I don't know if it's a good thing, but that might be a reason why I think this movie is actually quite underwhelming compared to some of the others. Not that the others are like spectacular, all-time great movies, but I think the other movies later on get better than this one. Because this one is outside of the women. There's not a whole lot to it. You know, I think the characters, for the most part, pretty dry and boring. The story, who really cares about the story in a movie like this? I mean, there is a little bit of a, you know, a bit of a thrilling, suspenseful type portion to the story that comes in much later in the movie, where someone, you know, someone kills someone and we kind of find out who that is. But yeah, the bigger plot in the movie with the selling of computer secrets or whatever it is, I kind of didn't really care at all.
Yeah, so this is a movie I have literally never heard of before. Chucky suggested it. I've never heard of this director before. And so I didn't really exactly know what to expect. So come to find out it's sort of actiony, more comedy, mostly softcore porn, which is fine. Though I have to say, as nice as some of these women look, you know, it's almost a shame that all we get to see are their topless bodies. I know there were some amusing scenes in here. A few of them, you know, most of them were somewhat goofy, but such as the scene in which they're in the race car trying to escape from the helicopter, and she's trying to, well,
She's basically trying to fuck during a high-speed chase with weapons,
like,
yeah.
And just like, they start shooting. It's like, oh, they have guns. Like, what do you think I've been trying to tell you? And so that did crack me up. And, there's a few other scenes that were legitimately amusing. Some interesting, mildly interesting plot points. The main mystery about the computers, that never did much for me. But there are some interesting characters anyway. And in fact, the story didn't even go exactly where I thought it was going to go. So I guess kudos to that. But there's also some really goofy things, like like that family, for instance, who keeps wanting to race him every time they see him, and the guy's like, "Oh, cool, let's go race now." And yeah, they could have taken those 3 scenes out. That would have been just fine, and they could have thrown in some extra scenes with the I don't know the names, and that probably doesn't matter. The 2 young women who are next to him in the board, it just popped over every now and again.
The very neighborly.
Speaking of which,
yeah.
we never do find out how they get past his security, if he even has security. So I was sort of thinking there might be spies or in on this somehow, but no, they're just like 2 very neighborly. I mean, if I had neighbors like that, my God.
I had the same thought. Well, one of the amusing things is when we first kind of chose this movie to discuss for this show, I had a look on IMDb at the keywords, or the plot keywords for this movie, and first thing that comes up is big breasts. So any movie that starts with that, I'm probably down to watch it. But this is like one of those movies that's it's pre-internet porn days. Like, this is where you kind of got your adult entertainment from, if you weren't one of those people who wanted to go into the closed off room in a video store where you come out of the room and everyone gives you that dirty look.
Yeah, I do have to say, since I was born in '93, I feel somewhat blessed to not have to deal with all of that, like, old-timey, like, old sex shops and corded off video sections. It just blows my mind that people had to go through that, like buying magazines. Like, oh my God, that sounds like such a hassle.
And then you gotta recall that, I doubt they sterilized the tapes or video cases or anything being returned from the video rental shops, so who knows what's been touching what and where, and while that movie has been rented out.
Just a late night thought for all you guys out there.
But this movie, the majority of scenes where there's no tits, it's pretty dull to me. But it does have, from time to time, there's a few amusing quips. Like, there's the ever classic, "You're a private investigator, investigate our privates" type line, and
yeah, I'm going to have to find a way to use that in my real life somehow.
Yeah, and probably the one quote from the movie that I really enjoyed is this one guy. I guess it's like I can't remember what he was. Was he like the chief or some police chief or something? I can't remember, but they're looking at this naked photo, and this older guy is looking at it and is like, "That's what we call hard evidence."
That's quite professional of that officer. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's a few others, like where Cody's going on about how his hands are lethal weapons, and this is after his failure to shoot a guy like 5 or 6 times, and the woman next to him is like, "Yeah, just be careful when you play with yourself." There's things like that pop up every now and again in the movie that kind of make you giggle, but I can't really think that I want to watch this entire movie just to see those few 3 or 4 lines.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say, if you want to be a private detective, you should probably know how to shoot a gun. It's just my opinion.
But I mean, if being a detective means that almost every woman you come across is down to fuck, well, there'd be a lot more private detectives out there.
It is an impressive list of women. I do think one of the sisters was probably the one in the shower, is probably the most attractive woman there. But to be fair, there were plenty of really attractive women, such as, God, what was her name? I forget her first name, but the race driver, whose last name was Nagos. So some classic, has an H in it too, just two. And she was actually, I think, the first topless scene in the movie. So well done there. And then, of course, I can't forget My Neighborly Friends.
Yeah.
I do wish we had seen more of them. Though I did enjoy him getting that phone call and he's just trying to get off the line so he can engage in his other activities. So it must be hard to have that much fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed, let's call it Knockers and the Neighborly Chicks. Yeah, those were the standout ones to me, I think.
Now, out of interest, because I forget if I even asked this, how did you run into these movies?
I'm pretty sure I've seen some of the later movies, like just, or at least scenes from them, just here and there. I had heard some people talk about some of these movies just in, movie groups. Like the next one after this, I think, is Hard Ticket to Hawaii, and it's got its fan base, I guess. In fact, from what I remember, I did watch that movie a while back. It's definitely a lot more entertaining and exciting than this one, and the quality of the production seems quite a bit better as well. So, yeah, I saw one or two of these I think on Tubi in the past couple of years, and these are from my time, back in the 90s and maybe late 80s. These types of movies, even though a lot of them are kind of all the same in most ways, it's more of a nostalgic thing for me, because my teenage years, I grew up before the internet, so, or just as the internet was kind of coming in with dial-up connections, so you can't really get your porn fix or anything from that. You have to get whatever you can get from your cable TV movies and that type of thing. So these are the type of movies I grew up with to get that kind of action, so to speak. So yeah, they've got a bit of a special place because of that for me.
So you're basically saying they touch your special place?
Wow. They don't, but I'm not saying the special place never gets touched during these movies.
Yes.
I will just point out one other thing, just because you may or may not be aware of it. In the movie, there's this one older couple in a Winnebago, and the male driver, that's Andy Sidaris. He's the guy that makes these movies. So
that's okay. That's not how the image I had of him.
He's pretty old when he started these movies. I think he might have been in his 50s in this movie. So
well, God certainly blessed you.
Yeah, I think he died about 13 years ago. In his 70s, I think he was, something like that. Yeah, but anyways, yeah, he certainly managed to get the whammon for his movies. In fact, I'm not sure if the woman in it was his wife. I can't recall, but I know he's married, because I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff, and in the behind the scenes footage that I was watching, well, it wasn't really behind the scenes footage for this movie, it was just for any of his movies, and he'd have Julie Strain kind of standing next to him, and she would just find every opportunity during this interview to get her tits out, which I appreciated.
That will go onto my list of things to probably forget.
She's in a lot of the later movies, so depending on how big a fan you are of her, there she is. So Malibu Express, hey? it's got tits, and that's at least worth a few points. But the rest of the movie, it's pretty dull, pretty dry. Let's put it this way, if you remove the tits from the movie, you got a pretty dull, boring, goofy movie that's not, doesn't have a whole lot of humor in it. It tries, but there's no laugh out loud moments except maybe that hard evidence line. That was just a classic. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. I guess the only reason why I bought this movie is because it goes with all the other movies that I bought. I got all 12, so...
No, did you see this before you bought it?
Yes, I had seen it once, and I kind of thought about the same of it the first time. I thought there was a chance, hey, maybe... Because I think the first time I didn't watch it in HD, and this time I did. I thought maybe, just maybe, that's going to make a difference. Maybe it did in a little way, but not in any way that's going to drastically affect my rating of the movie. So if I ever watch it again, it's only because I choose to watch the entire series again. But even then, I don't know if there's all that much point, because from what I recall and what I hear is that none of the other movies are really connected to this one, outside of maybe one character who says he's like, I don't know, the cousin or something of Cody. I don't know.
Huh. Well, that was actually a surprisingly low rating from you. So I'm actually giving this one a 5, mainly because while I didn't necessarily enjoy a lot of it, like I said, some of the really goofy comedy scenes were a bit much. I still had fun with a lot of it. Some quality nudity, some few funny scenes, and it's, I mean, a 5 is like pretty below average for me, my average being a 7 out of 10. So it's definitely not a great movie or good movie by any means. But, I could theoretically see myself sometime in the future watching it again, if only for... no, to be fair, I would probably skip over the stupid racing scenes. But there's still something there to engage me, shall we say. But I think a 5 out of 10... Well, maybe being a bit generous, I think it seems fair.
I was tossing up between a 4 and a 5, and I was tossing.
Some of the Australian slang coming on.
Yeah.
In its defense, it did have a pretty catchy song, but falling in love with a girl in the Sanderford, so that one actually might make my iTunes. Next up, we have from 1986, Crawlspace, which most distinguishing feature might be the fact that it stars Klaus Kinski, who is probably a big name. I recognize the name. I don't know where I know the name from, but he's in this movie.
He's a fucking weirdo.
Indeed. So Crawlspace is a very, very basic movie. Pretty much, this is an apartment building. The guy who runs it is a bit off. This young college student rents a room. She hears noises and things just don't feel right. There's some rats around the apartment. There's also this one girl in a cage upstairs with a tongue cut out. That's not normal. There's also the occasional Nazi thing going on. So, I don't know, just a great place to rent an apartment. It's a very cheap feeling movie. I have no idea what the budget was, but it just feels like a very cheap movie. And I guess, to its credit, I think it does as much as it can with the idea it has. I don't personally think there's much in the way of outstanding scenes, but I mean, this is maybe like the 3rd time I've seen this movie, and I've never hated it. I've just never particularly found it all that memorable. And I think it's probably much the same with this variant. It's not bad. I just have a hard time imagining this makes anybody's favorite 80s movies.
This is one of those movies that I always remember looking at on the video store shelf. It'd always be there. I'm pretty sure the cover of it, at least on the Australian VHS release, it did have I think a part of Klaus Kinski's face on it. So I was always thinking, who's this fucking weirdo? And he's a big reason why the movie is just quite creepy, because he is just quite creepy, and I don't even know if that's his acting or if that's how he normally is. I kind of get the feeling that's how he normally is. Oh my god, what a weirdo. Like you said, like there's not heaps of outstanding scenes in the movie, but I think it's just a general creepiness of him that really does most of the damage in the movie for the viewing experience. I mean, but there is that one chair kill which you don't really see much, but
it looks painful.
It just looks so painful. So, you know, there's definitely certain moments that are creepy, and like even just something simply like towards the end where he's got this little like something on wheels as he's in the
it's like an air duct.
Yeah, the air duct. And I think once he gets on that end, he just starts rolling towards her. I mean, it's kind of amusing, but at the same time, you're like, damn, this is just one creepy ass dude. And imagine this guy just, you know, coming up on you when you're this woman stuck in the air duct. I mean, that's all I really have to say about it, to be honest. He's kind of like the Greasy Strangler without the grease. He is, but you know what I'm trying to say. Without actual heaps of grease poured onto him. Let's just say that. To be honest, just for him alone, I would recommend at least checking the movie out. I'm not necessarily saying it's a great movie, but in terms of just creepy actor / character, he's up there.
Yeah, and to be fair, this movie is only like an hour and 20 minutes long, so even if it's not to your liking, it's not like it lasts all that long to begin with. And it never really, it doesn't really, at least to me, it never really drags. But it does sometimes feel like there's not that much going on. But there's still enough content here, especially toward the end, that I guess makes up for it. I don't necessarily care that much about the backstory of Kinski's character. Mainly his father being a Nazi and him having inclinations toward that type of thing. I guess there's some interesting ideas there. I do like the whole Russian roulette thing after each kill. So that was always, I would say, suspense was interesting. Especially that one time he like shoots a gun 3 times. Like, hey, he's really going for it. So I don't know. It's a movie that it doesn't feel like there's that much to it, but I think you make a pretty good point that Klaus Kinski puts a lot into the movie. If it had been him starring, I'm not sure how it would have turned out. I do, from my understanding, apparently there's a lot of issues behind the scenes, because apparently he's not an easy actor to work with.
Yeah.
Which isn't. That's pretty understandable. If given, I mean, you can't really tell from the movie. I mean, the guy's creepy, but like Chucky said, you can't necessarily tell how much of that might be his own stuff. So I don't know. I find it interesting that the movie came out as functional as it did. I just have a hard time imagining this ranking up there. I don't really hear that many people speak about this movie outside of Klaus Kinski's performance, and I think that's probably pretty telling. Like I said, I feel like this is a movie that might be worth checking out. Like I said, you're not going to lose much if you do. It's just not a movie that is probably going to stick to your mind outside of maybe some of the Kinski scenes. And I do like the idea of him having a woman caged up. I mean, that's pretty creepy. We don't really find out who that woman is. I'm assuming just some random past victim, but we don't know why she's more special than any other woman. So that might have been a nice little backstory. But as it is, the movie is competent. It does enough things right. It's just not necessarily the most enjoyable way to spend my time. So I'm thinking 6.5, and I would probably round up to a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I was weighing up between a 6 and a 7, and I just don't know how many other movies I've come across where just the actor alone is really doing the creep factor for me like this one does. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7. You just gotta see it. Words can't really describe how disturbingly creepy this guy is. And hey, look, you do get to see a little bit of tete action, and I think there's one blonde in the movie. She's in like a whole bunch of other 80s and 90s, those softcore porn type of erotic thriller type movies, and I appreciate that for sure. And I know Jiggy does too.
Yes.
We'll move on to Valentine from 2001. About a group of women who are stalked by, I guess, some guy around Valentine's Day. He sends them fucked up Valentine's Day cards and gifts, and he attacks them too. It's good stuff. The funny thing is, I want to call this a modern day slasher, but the more and more I think about it, this movie's almost 20 years old. I mean, I remember watching this one with a couple of my friends, just renting it out roughly around the time that it came out, and yeah, it's I will say, I think for a slasher from, let's call it the noughties, I guess that's what they call it, from, movies made in between 2000 and 2009, and I think it's a pretty decent slasher movie.
I've seen this movie maybe twice before, but it's been quite some time since I last saw it. I'm just going to throw out maybe 10, 12 years. I mean, it's been years since I've seen this one, so I was really excited to see it again, especially me being a big slasher fan, and post-Scream slashers always interest me. About a year or so ago, I watched Urban Legends again, and I found it somewhat underwhelming. It's a movie I used to enjoy, but then I went back to it and I found I didn't quite like it as much as I hoped I would. And I feel like it's much the same for this movie, and I bring that up because the same director was behind both movies. This movie has a lot of ideas I probably would have liked more in the 80s. I mean, I'll just say that the kills in this movie, almost every single one of them is pretty good. I like the bow and arrow scene, that's pretty good stuff. I like the hot tub scene. So there's a lot of good kills in this movie. But the basic story just, it feels like it's lacking. Like the whole red herrings, like, oh my god, who's the killer? And when we finally find out who the killer is, it's like, oh hey, that explained literally nothing, well done. And I don't know, it just, I really wish I could like this more. But after seeing it again, I found myself, I enjoyed enough of it to warrant me watching it again in the future. But I have to say I was somewhat disappointed, and when it comes to post-Scream slashes, I'm going to have to always stick with I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I think is actually a pretty suspenseful movie. And then there's a movie from 2000 titled Cherry Flowers, which I think has a lot of really interesting ideas, and it actually feels a lot more unique than what I find Valentine had going for it.
Look, I thought the mystery element in this one is quite decent. I mean, there's at least maybe 4 different guys that they set it up that it could be. Now, obviously, with that opening scene, you're probably looking more towards, someone somewhere around the age of the girls that are getting killed. So I never truly believed that detective could have, or, the cop, that he could have been the killer, even though there was like one scene where they kind of tried to make it look like he possibly could have been.
I think one thing actually about that, the whole opening scene is fine, but you could say it just leads the audience to suspect it's going to be someone around their age, and it could have, for all we know, the killer could have been killing due to some completely unrelated reason, which I actually think I might have preferred over the direction they went, if only because, I mean, some of these characters, the suspects, were I guess interesting, but I don't know. I'm not saying it was obvious where it was going, because it's not. But 1 second, oh hey, this guy's your number 1 suspect, and then the very next scene, oh hey, it's obviously not going to be that guy. It just, I don't know, it just, I never felt entirely engaged with the whole mystery aspect, especially since, you know, like, half of these guys they know, and the other half, hey, this guy paid for one scene, could it be him? I don't know, but I still don't know if it really has an emotional impact on me.
Well, the opening to this movie, I mean, we open seeing Katherine Heigl's cleavage, which, that's something. Even though we did talk a bit earlier about Klaus Kinski being a bit of a difficult guy to work with, I've kind of heard similar things about her, or maybe that just a lot of people who work with her think she's a bitch or something. I don't know. But the other amusing part about that opening scene, she's having this date with this Jason guy who always refers to himself in the third person. He was
talk about an intro, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting character, very amusing guy to watch with the conversations that he's having. Comes off as a bit of a psycho with how he talks about himself and some of the faces that he pulls, but I think it was deserving of some pity sex. He made her pay, but he still tried to get some. He's quite determined, that guy. I guess the other part of that opening scene, then we go to, the creepy location where she's like cutting open a corpse, and it's a pretty dark place to be attacked by a serial killer.
Yeah, I do have to say that sequence right there, I thought was actually pretty good. I thought it was pretty suspenseful. And it's worth mentioning, I really do like the design of the killer. I like the mask, and I just like I like the whole look.
Yeah, and I mean, we get to see the killer quite early, so he pops up in that opening scene. We get to see the costume and everything, and it's always good to have that little hint of subtlety to the costume, just so, don't go full Slipknot mode where, everyone just looks like a monster type mask. Now that we talk about the killer costume, it made me think towards the end of the movie, as we begin, or by the end of the movie, we essentially learn, okay, who the killer is. And there's multiple scenes where you see this person not in costume, and then obviously they're also in costume killing people at this party. So it made me think... the movie Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams, how there's a scene towards the end where he has to continually get in and out of costume because he's going between tables. And I kind of felt like at some point, you think the guy would screw up here where maybe he would still be in costume and talking to his girlfriend, and it's like, oh shit, I forgot to, I fucked up, and now I'm wearing... Well, kind of like Mrs. Doubtfire did, where he's wearing the lipstick or whatever, and he fucks up with all the costume changes. I was just kind of expecting like similar, well, not expecting, but you think that kind of thing would happen in this situation with just constantly getting in and out, of the costume. Another interesting thing, I mean, I look... As I do for a lot of movies when we discuss them, I'll look on IMDb, see what people are saying about it. It's only got a 4.9 on IMDb, which is rather low. And I guess it seemed to have, like, when the movie came out, a lot of people shat on it, I guess. I never really heard... I mean, I never heard anyone rave about the movie, but I don't know if I ever recall people talking that badly about the movie either. And I noticed that when you look at the ratings, it seems females rate the movie a little bit higher than the males do. So that was kind of interesting. I guess that might have something to do with the fact that it centers around a group of women, but technically a lot of slashers do. So, I mean, what is looking at Denise Richards too tough for the guys? I mean, they might be a little gay.
Yes.
It's not tough to look at. Though I do speaking of that, I do appreciate the ambitious detective trying to get with Paige, Denise Richards' character. So that was a valiant effort and attempt, which didn't quite pan out for him. Though I will say one scene that she's involved with, and it's one of my favorite. Well, the line itself, maybe it doesn't do anything for anyone, but it's a line that I constantly reference in real life, just as a joke to my wife or whatever situation comes up. But there's a scene where he goes upstairs, he gets naked, and she kind of just like, so you took me up here to show me your penis, and he's kind of and eventually he's like, what are you waiting for? Wax it. So I always use the wax it line.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, so actually about that scene, the scene's not necessarily interesting, but I'm just somewhat confused what she expected. Like, I want, like, I'm assuming maybe she knew he was going to do that, and she just went up just to screw him over. I have to say though, tying that guy down and then doing what she did, I would probably constitute that as assault.
Well, technically he did ask her to wax it.
Okay.
So
I guess. I mean, I'll just see that court case. Like,
I think she'll get off on a technicality there, and he'll have to get off in another way. I assume that what she expected out of that situation was just maybe a little more romance leading into the sex.
Maybe she didn't know.
Rather than just like, here's my dick, let's do this.
And actually, toward the end, this just hit me, and this is something else that sort of bothered me. Toward the end, there's like this giant epic uber party going on. And hey, it actually has pretty good music. I heard Linkin Park in the background during one scene. Another scene I heard some Disturbed. So I'm enjoying the soundtrack. But then this is hot tub kill, and just as it happens, only one person's in the hot tub. I absolutely do not believe that in the party that has like a few hundred people there, only one person would be in the hot tub. I just don't buy it for a second. And there's another scene in which a woman runs across the killer accidentally. I think it's in a gaming pool room, and it seems obvious to me that people were in the room. They're like cops sitting around there, and hey, the room's entirely empty aside from the killer and this woman who just happened to stumble in. And again, I just don't buy that room would be empty. I don't buy it for a second. It just seemed awfully convenient, and it might seem like a small thing, and maybe it is. But I'm watching these scenes and like, where's really other people in the party just in a single room? It didn't seem real to me.
Look, obviously it was a really big place. I mean, it's a rich daddy's girl type of place. I mean, they've got a whole room just for a pool, an indoor pool.
It was a nice room.
So I would assume that, you know, they've kind of just tried to keep the party and I know, you know, you expect some people to kind of run off into other parts of the house, but I'd imagine they'd try to contain a certain part of the house for the party. And
I mean, they might try to contain it. I don't see how they could, though. I mean, it's not like they have guards guarding every door. It's pretty much a free range type thing. It just didn't strike me as something that was particularly realistic, but then again, I've never been to a party at a mansion before, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the soundtrack, and that's another thing that popped out to me. So this is like one of those movies that just has a lot of, like, some nostalgic value to it as well, because there's so many bands in here that I listen to a lot. Like, I had a lot of these CDs that these songs came from. You know, they had Deftones in there, they had Static X, they had Disturbed, as you said. I think I even heard Orgy in there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. But my daughter was watching some of this movie, and she saw the scene, the one with the Deftones song in it, and immediately as that drum beat started, she looked at me and was like, is this Deftones? And I looked at her and I was like, my job as a parent is done.
Well done. Must be a good feeling.
Just a couple of other small things. David Boreanaz, or I don't know how you pronounce his name. I will just say, the funny thing here is, see, I have my own name for this guy whenever I see him. I call him David Boring Ass. And mainly because he's one of those guys who, he's fairly mediocre to average actor who's really only got his popularity from being like this stud muffin type guy in some popular TV shows.
Now, at the risk of sounding ignorant, which guy is this? See the alcoholic?
Yes.
Okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't know if anyone else out there also calls him that, but maybe I'm the only one. But, come on. It's a clever name. It sounds similar to his actual name, so...
A+.
Yeah. There is also... I mean, we should probably also mention the weirdo neighbor of Kate. The one who likes to rhyme. Hey, Kate, you want to date Kate?
It's so fake, Kate.
Yeah, and...
Hey, you have to respect the guy for living his life.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling there is no date with Kate, and he'll be left to masturbate.
I see. You're like a rapper now.
Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me of another character that I think just had one scene. But it was I found it quite amusing. I didn't mention this movie has like a few small portions of comedy. There's like the speed dating scene, which is pretty funny.
One of my favorite things in the movie is that weirdo neighbor when there's a scene where he gets, attacked, and I just like the line, "I am not well." I mean, that much is clear.
Yeah, that was quite amusing. And there's another scene in which the rich girl is arguing with her, I guess technically his stepmother, and it's just like a typical catty argument because these people are basically the same age. Imagine on the side note having a stepmother being the same age as you. It might be different if you're male, but just the argument though, like, I think of you as a stepmother as soon as you're old enough to rent a car on your own, and others like catty argument, male or the bride from Hal, I think was another line. And it's just a little small comedic scene. I feel like she was undervalued, the Asian stepmother. She could have been a very interesting character. Or, I also wanted to point out the scene during the outshow, if you were to call that an outshow. That was, that's a scene that always stuck with me. Now, I really like the Carol A. Answorth bow and arrow type thing, which is a, Cupid-esque reference. I like that. I thought it was cool. But that outshow was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. Like, is those things real? Do those things exist? Do people go to the things? Because that doesn't look enjoyable whatsoever.
Love me. Love me. Love me.
Like, that just seemed like, I guess it's technically out, and I'm not against out or anything, but if that's what out is, I could do without. I do enjoy that they referenced later to the police officer, yeah, it's really bad out. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen it, it's pretty bad out. So I appreciate that. But I mean, I don't know, that scene always stuck with me because it was just so weird. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I've been to museums before. I like museums, they're fine, but that was not a museum, so I have no idea what that was.
That was an impressive, elaborate attempt at arranging a threesome.
Yeah, that's a good point. I felt sort of bad for the guy. Like, he tried so hard.
Yeah.
I sort of like how she's just standing there undressing, like not saying anything. Actually, just one more small thing. I enjoyed how this movie stole a plot element from Alone in the Dark.
Just remind me what that is?
Nosebleed.
Ah, the nosebleed. Okay, yeah. I'm
going to assume. No, maybe I'm wrong in my assumption, but I'm going to assume they saw Alone in the Dark because I don't know. It seems like it's like the exact same type of thing. Only I think it's done better in Alone in the Dark, but that's just me.
Okay, well, look, I had a decent time with this one. I thought it was pretty entertaining, and there's some nostalgic value to it, like with the soundtrack, and, this is one of those rare movies that I saw for the first time with a bunch of my friends, and with a bunch of friends who aren't necessarily horror fans, and We had a pretty good time with it from what I recall, and that's always just kind of translated into all my other viewings. It brings back certain memories and things like that. And I guess one other thing is that you brought up Scream a couple of times, and I feel like my enjoyment of this one is kind of on par with my enjoyment of Scream. I mean, I know a lot of other people that out there would consider Scream to be a better movie, so I'm not going to argue that, but just the amount of fun I had with this one is similar to the amount of fun I had with that one. So I tossed up between a 7 and an 8 for this. I'll probably go with an 8, just because, like I said, there's a lot of decent kills in this movie, and there's a nostalgic value for me personally. The women, there's quite a few attractive women in the movie. Even, look, I mean, Denise Richards, she's probably the hottest one there, even though she's a little on the skinny side for my tastes, but still, enjoyable. Mwah.
Yeah, so this is one that, like I said, I probably enjoyed more when I was a kid, but having revisited it, I'm not necessarily surprised by my, I guess we could say, disappointment, being that same thing happened with Urban Legend. I know, it just feels at times sort of shallow. It has really cool kills, and I feel like the story had potential, but this just added post-96 slashes out there that I thought had both a better mystery, better story overall. I mean, gold kills are great, but it didn't have, I mean, it had some funny scenes, but I wanted a bit more from it, so I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
One thing that I did forget to mention earlier that I wanted to just highlight, I think the poster for this one is pretty cool. Like the mask made out of the he loves me not letters, a diary, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's a really cool looking poster for a slasher movie.
Yes.